UFC Austin, Draftkings has released the salary so we could take our first look. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. Last week was shambles, shambles, and more shambles. Grapplers couldn't grapple. Strikers could really strike. And we had some questionable decisions up and down the card. Very strange week. So now we're back in the US. We have 14 fights to work with. A lot to like this week. And we're going to start right at the top of the slate at 9,500. We have Cody Stamann. He's fighting Eddie Wineland this week. He's too damn expensive, I can tell you that straight away. Historically on DraftKings, he does not score all that well. And I would be shocked if he paid off his salary in this fight. Now obviously Eddie Wineland is on his way out. We know that. Sean O'Malley sent him to the upper room. And John Castaneda was able to do the same thing. He's 37 years old, down at 135, so that's not really a division that has a lot of older guys in it. The writing is on the wall, but I do like Eddie Wineland's footwork and his takedown defense. And I like it because Cody Stamann has no power in his hands. His striking is very basic. It's a means to an end. He uses his striking to set up his takedowns. That's clear. And I might go as far as saying on the feet, Eddie Wineland might have a slight edge even at this stage in his career. I do think his hands are a little bit better, but I do expect Stamann to still win this fight, and I expect it to be competitive. So while I do think it's competitive, I do think it goes the distance. I don't think it scores that many points on DraftKings, and I think that Stamann's going to end up winning based on control time against the cage, finding some takedowns if he's willing to shoot a lot, but I don't see him scoring all that many points. So my pick for this fight is Cody Stamann by decision, but at the same time, when fights go the distance, the way scorecards are nowadays, it's a complete mystery. And next at 9,400, we have Adrian Yanez. He's going to be fighting Tony Kelley this week. Both of these guys have qualities that I like. Durability, cardio, grittiness. We saw that from Yanez in his last two fights where he battled a lot of adversity against Davey Grant and he weathered a crazy storm against Randy Costa. And in Tony Kelley's last fight, he beat Randy Costa. We picked him there because of the qualities that we just mentioned. He ended up beating up Randy Costa and looking pretty good while he was doing it. So now we have two junkyard dogs going head up. This should be a war.
Excellent.
I'm leaning toward the Adrian Yanez side this week just because he's going to land a little bit more. He's probably going to look faster and have bigger moments. Neither of these guys are looking to shoot takedowns, so I think it's wise to take the younger guy who's a little bit quicker, and he's got a home game this week down in front of the Texas crowd. For DraftKings, however, this might be a good fight to stay away from. We have 14 fights to work with this week. There's likely to be a good amount of finishes, and you'll need that kind of upside in your lineups. This is probably a high-scoring week. We could have a similar situation to what we had in Adrian Yanez's last fight against Davey Grant, where he landed a lot of strikes. It looked really good. The guys went to war, but he only scored 70 points. So for DraftKings, like Rosa Parks once said, nah, I'm good. But the pick for this fight is Adrian Yanez by decision. Next at 9,300, we have Ricardo Ramos. He's going to be fighting Danny Chavez this week, and there's a lot to like about Ramos overall. He started fighting in the UFC at 21 years old. He's got good size and length for the division. He trains out of Team Alpha Male. He's 6-3 in the UFC, and he's found ways to win fights here at the highest level, even when he's put in some bad situations. And you can see now that his striking is starting to catch up with his grappling, but his jiu-jitsu has never been a concern, and I think that's where he wins this fight. On the other side, Danny Chavez is going to be 9 years older, at height and reach disadvantages, less experienced of the two, and he's going to be shooting for takedowns as often as possible. That is where I expect him to get himself into trouble because the ground game of Ramos is no joke. I expect this fight to make it to the third round, and that's where Ramos finds a submission. Danny Chavez has a bad gas tank. He's never won a third round in his UFC career, and after all those takedown attempts, he's going to be fried, give up position, and want to go home. So the pick for this fight is Ricardo Ramos by late submission and scoring a decent amount of DraftKings points in the process. And to go a step further, I expect him to be way under-owned. I think Adrian Yanez is going to pull a decent amount of ownership, and I think some of these other expensive guys are going to be pulling ownership as well. So I think Ricardo Ramos goes a little bit under the radar this week. And speaking of low owned, we have a $9,200 Gloria de Paula. She's fighting Maria Oliveira this week. This fight is pretty low level as far as the UFC is concerned. Gloria de Paula is coming off her first UFC win over Diana Belbizia, and that was a close fight where both of them had success, but honestly, those 88 significant strikes that you see on the screen, there was nothing on them. Maria Oliveira, on the other side, lost her UFC debut to Tabitha Ricci, which is understandable, and she lost a few years ago on Contender Series to Marina Rodrigues. No shame in that, it happens to a lot of people. But outside of those two fights, Oliveira has crushed absolute cans on the regional scene, and when she has fought decent opponents, she's lost. So I expect her to lose this week as well to Gloria De Paula, and honestly, this fight worries me a little bit. Not many people expected Weili Zhang to put up a slate-breaking score last week, and that's why she came in at real low ownership. Imagine if Gloria De Paula somehow finds a first-round finish in this fight. If that happens, you're going to need her in your lineup, so you're looking at a situation from a DraftKings perspective where this becomes very tough to call, because the matchup is soft, the ownership is low, but the price is very high. And to quickly touch on something that I hear out there pretty often, I see a lot of people talk about, I'm never going to play women's MMA on DraftKings. And I understand most of the fights go the distance. We talk about taking over props all the time, but at the same time, you do need to look at these women's fights and look for these opportunities, because just look at last week. You had 4 women's fights on the cards. The winners, Weili, 132, Valentina, 114, Silvana Gomez Juarez, 103, Jocelyn Edwards, over 99 points. So just be mindful of the fact that regardless of division, fighters can get there on DraftKings. So just be careful when you're limiting your player pool. That was a mistake that I made last week. But the pick for this fight is Gloria De Paula to win. It's hard to say how, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Maria Oliveira quit at some point. Next at 9,100, we have Jasmine Jasudavicius, who's going to be fighting Natalia Silva, who's making her UFC debut this week. Jasudavicius looked good against Kay Hansen, as most do. She was able to control the pace of the fight. It looked like her size gave Kay Hansen a lot of issues. She's an okay grappler, and she's going to be looking for takedowns in this fight, but that worries me a bit. And the reason why that worries me is because Natalia Silva is going to be throwing up arm bars left and right every time this fight hits the mat. So on a card where a lot of the favorites look very good, I think Silva can be an extremely sneaky dog in this spot. I think a lot of people are going to look at her record, see the losses, and want to stay away. But you have to consider the fact that she's only 25. 3 of those losses came in her first 4 fights when she was 18 years old. So with no amateur experience, she's coming in and losing 3 of her first 4 fights at 18 years old, loses again when she's 19, and then her most recent loss was when she was 20 to Marina Rodrigues, which, no shame in that, it happens to a lot of people. But in the last 5 years, she hasn't lost. She hasn't lost since that loss to Marina Rodrigues. So you're looking at a situation where we have somebody who's relatively unknown, very cheap on this slate, still learning on the job, and might even end up being the better grappler in this fight. Jasudavicius hasn't fought any good grapplers in her career, and if she makes one mistake on the ground, one of those long arms might get snatched up. So the pick for this fight is Natalia Silva by submission. Very sneaky. Next at 9,000, we have Phil Hawes. He's going to be fighting Winn this week, and for me, when you have a UFC woke conversation, I feel like Winn is in the conversation. And before I get into the quick breakdown here, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, anything. All of those things help me out more than you know, and I think I'm finally figuring out what I'm going to do with those gloves. 2 of you will have a glove each. It's going to be pretty cool. Now back to this fight. When you talk about Wotes, I think you need to talk about Winn. He's got no business fighting at middleweight, and I don't see him winning this fight anyway. Phil Hawes is going to have a 6-inch height advantage, a 7.5-inch reach advantage, serious power, more experience, can wrestle if he wants to. Granted, in this fight, I don't see him using a lot of wrestling against the much shorter man in Winn, but if he does get on top, I think Winn struggles to get back to his feet. The only way that Winn has success in this fight is if he's able to secure takedowns, and if he can't do that, he's going to get knocked out. Phil Hawes will easily be the best fighter he's ever faced, the heaviest handed fighter that he's ever faced, and the most athletic guy that he's ever faced. I think Phil Hawes is a slam dunk this week. The physical differences coupled with the punching power make him a great play on DraftKings as well. The pick for me for this fight is Phil Hawes by knockout. Next at 8,900, we have Kevin Holland, and when he's not fighting bad guys or choking out internet trolls, he's beating up dudes in the octagon. Now, do I think that Kevin Holland's going to be a champion at some point? No. Do I think he can compete with the division's elite? No. Do I think he absolutely smokes any and all unranked welterweights right now? Yeah, I do. And that's what he has here this week against the Dirty Bird Tim Means. Tim Means is now 38 years old, but has put together a small winning streak. Granted, the winning streak is against Pepe Staropoli, who's no longer in the UFC, Mike Perry, who's no longer in the UFC, and a UFC win over Nicholas Dalby, who's looked pretty solid, but Tim Means was the taller, longer guy in that matchup, and he was able to bully Dalby up against the fence in the clinch. Kevin Holland, however, is going to be the taller man. He's going to have a 6-inch reach advantage, and he can crack on the feet. Tim Means typically does eat a lot of shots, and I could see him going down this week by a big hook from Kevin Holland. I expect Means to try to grapple in this fight because that's everyone's game plan when they try to face Kevin Holland, but I don't think the ever-improving wrestling of Kevin Holland will fail him in this spot. I like that he's down at 170 and committing to this weight class, and who knows, maybe he can make some noise toward the top end of this division. The pick for me in this fight is Kevin Holland by knockout. Next at 8,800, we have Calvin Kattar. He's going to be fighting the very powerful Josh Emmett this week, but I have to say I do like the main event favorite. I love Calvin Kattar at this price. He's going to throw a ton of strikes. He's got the better boxing, the faster hands, and a 5-inch height advantage, slight reach advantage as well that he uses very well. We know that he's got a great chin and he's got excellent cardio. And I'll admit, after the beating that he took from Max Holloway, it left a lot of questions for me. I didn't know how he was going to look moving forward, but then he completely dominated Giga Chikadze in every phase of the game, 50-45s across the board. Come on! I expect the output of Kattar to win him this fight, and we may even see Josh Emmett slow down after the third round because he's dealing with the pressure for 15 minutes straight from Calvin Kattar. I think rounds 4 and 5 he's going to be gassed. And I really look at the Michael Johnson fight and gain a lot of confidence for the Calvin Kattar side. Michael Johnson has those long arms, uses his reach well, throws fast combinations, and he gave Josh Emmett issues for 14 plus minutes in that 3-round fight that they had. I can see Kattar touching him up, cranking up the pace as the fight goes on while Emmett slows down. All Emmett has in this fight is big power, but he's going to need more than a hard overhand right to win this Saturday. This fight may be a good stacking opportunity for cash, but in tournaments, Kattar is definitely the side I want to go to. The pick for me for this fight is Calvin Kattar by decision. Next at 8,700, we have Kyle Daukaus. He's going to be fighting Roman Dolidze this week. Kyle Daukaus has a very well-rounded game. I expect him to win a decision in this fight. He's going to be forced to defend takedowns early, but as this fight wears on, I do see him taking over. Roman Dolidze doesn't have a great gas tank, and this is going to be a big step up in competition for him. I think Daukaus is the more dangerous guy of the two. I could see him hurting Dolidze on the feet and finding a submission on the mat, or stuffing a takedown and wrapping up a Darce choke, or maybe losing the first round, winning the second based on bigger moments, and then dominating the third round, leading to a decision win. For DraftKings, I do expect a lot of people to play Daukaus this week, but he might be worth it. When you look at his fights in the UFC, his last fight against Jamie Pickett, he put up 118. The fight before that, he was smoking that Kevin Holland pack, so you can add another 90 points to this where he scores 105, and he put up 91 points against Dustin Stoltzfus, so his scoring ceiling is there, and he's live for a finish in this spot. He's probably going to be looking for takedowns as well, so he might be worth a roster spot if he does meet expectations. So the pick for me in this fight is going to be Kyle Daukaus inside the distance. Next at 8,600, we have Albert Duraev. He's going to be fighting Joaquin Buckley this week, and apparently Albert Duraev looks like suspect from Def Jam Fight for New York. But I think on this feat, Buckley is going to have a big advantage in terms of hand speed, punching power, but obviously the wrestling has to go to Duraev. That's his bread and butter. Now, in Duraev's UFC debut, he really struggled to get Roman Kopylov to the ground. I think he went 1 for 11 on his takedowns, but once he was on the mat, he was able to go to work. Buckley actually leaned on wrestling in his last fight against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, but he struggled to keep him down and was even taken down 3 times himself. So this is essentially a striker versus grappler matchup, and in these kinds of fights last week, the strikers dominated. I think this week, however, we can expect things to go back to normal. So I see Duraev performing better than he did in his UFC debut and ultimately finding a submission in the first or second round. I say that because Buckley likes to crash into the pocket with big looping punches, and I think that's where Duraev is either going to change levels and grab a double leg, or he's going to crash the pocket as well, get chest to chest in the clinch, and then get a trip takedown from there and start working from top position. I don't like betting against my guy Buckley. I really don't, but I do think that this is a nightmarish matchup for him. The pick for me in this fight is Albert Duraev by submission. Next at 8,500, we have Gregory Rodrigues, aka RoboCop, aka Brazilian Barack. My fellow Brazilians, I'm gonna knock Julian Marquez out. He's fighting Julian Marquez this week, and this fight should be an absolute banger because RoboCop is very well rounded. A lot of people thought he won his last fight against Armen Petrosyan, but even in that loss, what he showed in that fight was good cardio, good durability, striking, grappling, everything. This week he does have a tough matchup on his hands with one of the Homer Simpsons of MMA in Julian Marquez. Marquez has that dog in him, and he's got a granite chin. He finds ways to win fights. He never gives up. That's what I like about him. And I would love to pick him as an underdog in this spot, but I don't think that I can. When you look at his finish over Maki Pitolo, he was being dominated for nearly that entire fight. Before that, he lost a split decision to Alessio Di Chirico. And yes, he did recently get a finish against Sam Alvey, so he wins in impressive fashion, but not against impressive competition. And there are serious holes in his game that he's been able to plug with durability and cardio, but that's not going to win him fights forever. Gregory Rodrigues is as technically sound as he is physically gifted, and I think that he can actually put Julian Marquez away in this fight. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, well, Julian Marquez has never been knocked out. You know who else has never been knocked out? Everybody, until they suffer their first knockout loss. I could also see Greg Rodrigues finding a submission in this spot. Marquez was taken down 5 times against Maki Pitolo, 4 times against Alessio Di Chirico, 4 times against Darren Stewart. If RoboCop is able to get on top, he's going to find his way to the back and he's going to finish this fight. So I'm taking the fighter that has more tools to win, more ways to win. I like him in this spot. The pick for me is Gregory Rodrigues inside the distance. Next at 8,400, we have Damir Ismagulov. He's going to be fighting Guram Kutateladze this week. Damir has been so solid in the UFC, currently 4-0, hasn't really been in much trouble yet either. He's great at controlling the pace of the fight and where the fight takes place. He wrestles when he needs to. Great footwork, good cardio, doesn't seem to be an issue for him. On the other side, you have Guram Kutateladze, who's also very solid, currently 1-0 in the UFC with a win over Matus Gamrot, who's going to be headlining a fight night card very soon. He's been out of action for nearly 2 years, but for a guy like him, it really doesn't worry me. On a card like this, where there's a lot of fights but not a lot of value, this does look like one of the more solid underdog spots in my opinion. I give the striking edge to Kutateladze, and I don't see Ismagulov being able to get takedowns as easily as Gamrot did. Ismagulov is a technician, but he isn't as dangerous as Kutateladze, and I think that that will make the biggest difference here. So for that reason, I think that Kutateladze can get out in front early with a big moment or two to steal the early rounds, and it's going to be hard for Damir Ismagulov to fight from behind, and I think that Kutateladze can fight from behind if he needs to. We saw that he does have decent power in his hands. So the pick for me in this fight is Guram Kutateladze by decision, who we might need on DraftKings considering the lack of good underdogs on this card. Next at 8,300, we have a legend of the game. You remember this guy? The one who cost you a bunch of money a few weeks ago? Ate some bad tacos. Are you kidding me? This fight's been rebooked. He's fighting Joe Lauzon still. This is a hard fight to choose from because the durability on each side is next to non-existent. This is essentially a battle between a wet piece of paper and a glass vase, so it's very hard to have any confidence on either side. Both of them can go down after one combination is landed. But I think the kicking game of Cowboy is going to be the difference maker in this fight. The kicking range is going to be where he dominates, and he tends to finish a lot of his striking combinations with kicks that if they land, they're definitely going to get big reactions out of the Lauzon side. I think Lauzon is still dangerous, of course, but the striking and the power advantage are still on the side of Cowboy for me. He was a lot more expensive last time out, so this lower price is also pretty attractive. If you play multiple lineups, it would be good to have exposure to both sides of this, but they probably don't go the distance. They probably throw down and score a decent amount of points. So the pick for me in this fight tentatively is Cowboy Cerrone. That might change for me later in the week, so make sure you watch out for the final picks video, but I do think that right now he probably gets it done, and he probably gets it done by way of TKO. And next at 8,200, we have Court McGee. He's fighting Jeremiah Wells this week. Court McGee has looked good recently, especially in his last fight where he dominated Ramiz Brahimaj. He's a junkyard dog. He fights hard from start to finish. He's very difficult to put away, and he's been doing this for a while. I think he has a bad matchup on his hands this week, however. When Court McGee wins, it's because he's able to get takedowns, wear guys out, but if he can't get takedowns, he's not a very dangerous striker, and he doesn't fight well from behind due to his low finishing upside. On the other side, we have Jeremiah Wells, who's a powerhouse on the feet and on the mat. Extremely physically strong, puts everything into his techniques. Like if he's swinging punches, he's swinging for the fences, and and if he's wrestling, he's looking for powerful takedowns and heavy pressure on top. I expect his physical strength in the clinch to be a little bit too much for Court McGee to handle this week. When McGee is trying to get him down, I don't think that he's going to be able to, and I can also see Wells landing something big on the feet and ending the fight shortly after. Obviously, the power style of Jeremiah Wells is a little bit scary because if he does gas out, then he's in McGee's world, but I actually think that he finds the finish before that can happen. So the pick for me in this fight is going to be Jeremiah Wells inside the distance, one of the best underdog plays of the week and one of the few underdog plays of the week. Now we'll be building lineups later in the week in the final picks video. I have some announcements coming soon. Yeah, announcements, for real, announcements. A lot of things to be excited about. Again, if you haven't already, make sure you like, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works by now. And subscribe to the channel. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers. You know what I get at 1,000 subscribers? Nothing. I get nothing, but it would be nice. But quickly to go over the card at 8,000 and below, we have Jeremiah Wells, who we just touched on. I think that he's very live to win this week. I think Joe Lauzon's live to win this week just because of the durability or lack thereof on the side of Cowboy. Kutateladze is probably one of the more attractive underdogs. I think that he has a very winnable fight on his hands against an opponent who's more of a fight manager than he is some kind of vicious finisher. Julian Marquez is 3-1 in the UFC, but I do think that that is a result of some relatively soft matchmaking. Darren Stewart's not very good. Maki Pitolo, I think, fights in Eagle FC. And Sam Alvey at this stage in his career. Buckley is outmatched in terms of grappling. Roman Dolidze is not the kind of guy that I would want to put money on. Josh Emmett's kind of one-dimensional with his punching power. Tim Means, I think, is completely outgunned on the feet from a speed, power, reach perspective. Winn, one of my wotes. Natalia Silva, extremely sneaky this week. Don't be surprised if she's able to snatch something up off her back. Maria Oliveira, scary person to put money on. I think that she quits at some point, and I could see Gloria de Paula putting up a really good score as a result of her looking for a way out. Danny Chavez is interesting because you have the wrestling upside. He's looking to secure 5-6 takedowns total, but at the same time, he might be outgunned when the fight does hit the mat, and round 3, you're not getting much of anything from him. Tony Kelley is not outgunned by any stretch. I think the younger, faster guy in front of his Texan crowd is probably going to get the rub, but at the same time, Tony Kelley is a dog, man. He really is, and I think that he could push a heavy pace right back, and Adrian Yanez has shown toughness, but the only reason we know he's tough is because he's getting touched up in a lot of these fights, so keep that in mind. Tony Kelley might be sneaky this week. Then Eddie Wineland, no thank you. If you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Again, if you haven't already, like the video, it really helps. Subscribe to the channel, get your dog to subscribe, get your physician to subscribe. I want everyone. And keep an eye out for the final picks video later in this week, and keep an ear out for some announcements.